What the heck is even the point anymore, ladies and gentlemen? Well, the San Diego Padres may be a disaster, but I've got a few little tips and tricks and reasons to keep watching them as they are not officially eliminated from the playoffs, but it will be coming any day now. You know what you're listening to, so let's get started.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for the 1st of September, Friday, September 1st. As always, I'm your host, with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can find me on Twitter at Javipeno, that's Javiipeno, or at LO_Padres for updates on the show, occasional tweets during the game whenever I'm have the heart to tweet about what's going on during a Padres game, which is basically impossible, but, you know, we still try it over there. You can also check out Locked On Padres on YouTube if you want to see whatever fit I'm wearing. One of my favorite shirts I've recently, I just got this for, like, my birthday recently. I don't know. It's just a really, really soft shirt, really cool looking color. I will be wearing more Padres gear in the future, don't worry. But not today, especially after what happened last night. Everybody, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And today's episode is a little bit of a fun one. A little fun one for your Friday. And here's the thing. I just said at the top. We're in September now, baby. You know what I mean? It's a new month. It's new beginnings. It's a fresh start. So I wanted to have a little bit of fun, and I know, you know, maybe some people are disappointed. I haven't been doing game recaps as much recently, and there's a reason for that. I think that doing game recaps is a little bit pointless at this point, just because I know they aren't technically eliminated, but I feel like they've been eliminated for like 2 weeks now. I've said it many times ever since that D-back series, but I still have to do the podcast, and I instead think that it'd be more fun to do other topics, more all-encompassing topics. So today, I wanted to give some of my reasons that I'm still going to watch the Padres, aside from the obvious, right? Like, aside from I cover them and do this podcast every day. I wanted to give some tips and tricks, because in baseball particularly in baseball, when your team is bad, it's like banging your head against the wall. Scratch that. It's like banging your head against a spiked wall. It's just the worst feeling because you have to suffer through it throughout the entire time. And look, Padres fans, it's been bad. It's been disappointing. Everybody knows that. If you've been listening to this pod, if you've been listening to any Padres content, you know it's been a disaster this year. But at least we're not, you know, the Oakland A's. I don't even know where I would begin to give a team like that hope, or the Rockies, or you know, one of those bottom dwelling teams. I don't even know where I'd begin in that respect. But with the Padres, I still think that there's good reasons to watch this team. And the following things, remember, nothing about me personally in terms of actually, you know, me posting every day. And I'm not going to go the simple route of you have to, well, a real fan keeps watching. I'm not someone who believes in that. Anyone who's been listening or watching for a long time knows that I have a little bit more lenient views on fandom. I think that particularly in baseball, especially, I don't think that there's any more brownie points or you get extra points because you follow a team even though they make you miserable and they're bad. I think that the Padres are unlike other teams. For example, let's say, I think if you're, say, a Royals fan, or if you're a Tigers fan, and your thing is like, our franchise is a disaster, or a White Sox as of late, man, y'all are lucky we ain't Locked On White Sox, because I would have some words for Jerry Reinsdorf's comments about, or not comments, yeah, his comments, and then also how they're not, you know, how they got a waiver for, you know, diversity hiring or something like that. I would have words, but don't worry. That's not what we're talking about today. I think that those teams, I totally don't think that you're a bad fan if you're like, I'm not following this anymore. It doesn't make me happy. At the minimum, I'm just going to stop watching the games every day. I think that that's fine. And I think especially in baseball, for those aforementioned teams that are often bad because of poor ownership, because of cheapness, because of not caring, because of just sheer incompetence and not hiring the people who are competent and maybe more qualified, then I don't think that makes you a bad fan. I just don't. You could find a backup team. Now, should you abandon them altogether? Not necessarily. If you find a real concrete reasons, go ahead. But to me, unfortunately, you're kind of wedded to your team. That's what I feel like in my history. But I don't want to focus as much on that. And again, I don't think that it makes you a bad fan. In the case of the Padres, I don't think anyone's going to use this season as like a, this is like a we want to quit supporting this team type of season, especially because they've had such a transformation ownership wise and just strategy wise. And while it hasn't worked for the most part, the fact that they are at least trying, and we aren't in the good old days of Chase Headley, not being extended, right? We're not in that era of, oh my God, yeah, we can't extend that player for an extra $40 million. You know what I mean? The Padres are like, actually, who can't we extend? That is a positive development, I think, for your franchise. The question is, how do you make that better? How do you take advantage of the fact that you have more of a big budget now and use that to parlay it into on-field success instead of just financial fans attending the stadium success? Because as I think people might know, not necessarily an ephemeral one, right? Like not necessarily an eternal one if you continue to play this poorly. So that's just what I want to start out with. I think it's totally fine if you're a Padres fan. You're not going to leave the team, but if you're like, you know what, we're getting to September, football's rolling around, basketball, you've got WNBA going on, you've got tennis going on, you've got, I think, gymnastics going on. I saw some story on Simone Biles, she rules. Then I totally think that that's fine. I think it's great. I still have to watch the games, but some of you are free. You know what I mean? Some of you could be free to like do some other things or do other things on the side. Don't pay too much attention to it. Sometimes when I'm watching games, I have some other work I'm doing, doing some write-ups, doing some baseball write-ups, or maybe I'm playing this little Marvel Snap game on my phone that I love that takes like 2 minutes to finish a game, right? Like all that stuff. So I just want to start off by saying I abhor the idea. I am appalled by the idea that if you choose not to just support your team that's failing and actively making you miserable, that makes you like an awful fan. I think what makes you an awful fan is being an awful person. And Lord knows, Padres Twitter has had some of those every now and then, right? Let's not be nasty out here. So that's just what I want to start with. But in terms of concrete reasons, I've got 8. I've got 8 reasons, guys. Hold on. Did I count that right? I'm sorry. I have 7 reasons. I have 7 reasons that I think that are still worth watching the Padres for, that don't have to do with showing blind loyalty or lack thereof, or having to do with me hosting this podcast every day, or having to do with minor league stuff. Because minor league stuff I think is different. I think it's different if you're following El Paso or the Tin Caps or whatever, right? Like I think that's totally different than following the major league team. So guys, these are my 7 tips, and I'm really excited to get into them. Not all of them are going to be super surprising, but we try anyway. We try anyway out here, guys. But before we get into it, I want to take just a quick second to talk about the sponsor that you heard at the top of the show, and that is FanDuel. I mentioned that football's rolling around. Well, FanDuel knows that, and they've got you covered over there, guys. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now. That's right, right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. Oh yeah, just for listening to this episode. How about that? And they say I don't do enough for you guys. Come on now. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So if you're trying to watch all them games, you're trying to, watch your Packers, I don't know, because San Diego doesn't have a team anymore. I don't know who you're watching. Maybe you're just watching your favorite fantasy players. NFL Sunday Ticket, and you're getting $100 off. So that's really cool. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props to over-unders to home runs in the case of baseball, touchdowns in the case of football, yards lost, whatever. They got you, man. Whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do to your heart's content, ladies and gentlemen. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season in style with an offer you don't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And we're back, everybody, here on the Locked On Padres podcast, of course. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. Free and available on all platforms. And go check us out on the SiriusXM app, and where you can also listen to the play-by-play broadcast of the Padres. Yeah, shout out SiriusXM. Let's start with the tips, guys. Number 1. Maybe I shouldn't be calling them tips as much as I should just be calling them reasons. Reasons is better. Number 1, I think, is the most obvious, and it's Blake Snell. Blake Snell has been electric for a while now. I think that this is no secret amongst literally anybody. Ever since basically ever since, not even basically, ever since we got to June, and ever since we got to Gary Sanchez getting more playing time, Blake Snell has been near unhittable for the most part. Particularly, he had 2 months. So here's the thing. In April and March, he had a 5.48 ERA, and I, being an idiot, was actually scared for a little bit. I've talked about this on the podcast for a little bit because he showed that he was, over the course of his Padres tenure, the fastball slider combination, once he starts fully getting back to that, is usually when he succeeds. Then he had a couple starts where he went back to that fastball slider and then it didn't work. So that made me worried. But I did not know that it was because we were in store for a treat. And that was not just the fastball and slider playing better, but all of his pitches in general. More than any time he's been pitching for the Padres, he has developed a full-scale repertoire. Blake Snell, or at least a better scale repertoire. You know what I'm saying? He's developed his curveball a lot better. Opponents are hitting only 99 against it. That's right, below 100. It's been an incredible pitch for him. He's used his changeup more effectively. And the fastball works too, especially when he's not making it rise too much. You guys know about Blake Snell. He's been great. And he's been so good, in fact, that he might damn well win the Cy Young for the National League this year. That's really cool. The last guy to do that, I believe, was a fellow by the name of Jake Peavy. And my apologies, I don't have off the top of my head when he did that. I'm going to Google that real quickly. But it's been a long time since the Padres have had a Cy Young pitcher. They've had Cy Young quality, yeah. So that was back in 2007. When he won for the Padres. Him and his killer 2.84 FIP, 2.54 ERA, 240 strikeouts. How many strikeouts Blake Snell has? If you guys are curious, if you just want to compare him to how our buddy Jake Peavy was doing, he's got, as of right now, 193 with still a month left. So he's kind of on par for that. In fact, he's been so good in the second half and so good for a while now that he kind of reminds me a little bit, not to the same extent because this fellow didn't walk nearly as many people, but he's going on a tear that reminds me of Jake Arrieta back in the day, if you guys remember, which I say back in the day funny, but Jake Arrieta had a similarly dominant stretch where he just stopped giving up runs. Interesting strategy, and it worked out for him, and he won the Cy Young back in 2015. He was incredible. Jake Arrieta, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to look at some of his months. From a game level perspective, he was good throughout the whole season, which is why I think he was such a slam dunk. One of the better seasons we've seen, finished with a 1.7 ERA. One of the better pitching seasons we've seen of this decade, absent your DeGrom and your... Is that it? I can't think of someone who's been better, honestly, than, for the decade at least, than Jake Arrieta. It's probably just Jacob DeGrom. And then Clayton Kershaw, probably. But... Single season wise, I think Jake Arrieta has had the best single season. But anyway, he of course in July 1.9 ERA. Then for the rest of the year, August a 0.43, September, October a 0.39. Incredible. Blake Snell to start this year, like I said with the 5.4 ERA, he's been just unbelievable ever since, and I can't get over how much better. This is a guy who had a 5.48 ERA, then lowered it to 3.82 in May, and then had 2 months that were Jake Arrieta-esque, 0.87 in June and 0.56 in July. In August, it's gone up to a 3, so he hasn't had quite the finish that I think we would have wanted from Blake Snell if you want to make the Jake Arrieta comp, but he's still been electric. I mean, nobody is hitting this guy's pitches. Just straight up, no one's hitting this guy's pitches. And he very well might win the Cy Young this year. It's totally possible. I know Spencer Strider of the Braves is someone that a lot of people are high on. He's definitely up there, and I could absolutely see it. But in terms of like pure numbers, Blake Snell has been amongst some of the best pitching that we've basically seen in the entire National League for the most part. I think that there's still some areas where he's not as good, but in terms of ERA, he leads the National League, and I think leads all of baseball. The only one close to him is Justin Steele at 2.69, and Kodai Senga, actually, at 3.17. He's been very good, but if you compare him to Justin Steele, his strikeout rate is infinitely higher, and his strikeout rate, in fact, is obscene, if we're being honest with you. Blake Snell is striking out batters at a 31.1% clip. Now, the reason Spencer Strider could end up getting this is because while his ERA is higher than Blake Snell's at 3.5, his FIP is also incredibly good at 2.87. right? Now, if you want to go by Sierra, which is a little bit more advanced stat, Blake Snell's been a little bit higher as well. So I think that if you're one of those nerds, I think that Spencer Strider is likely the winner here, depending on how this last month goes. Just because I think you take into account the FIP stuff, field independent pitching, Spencer Strider is better than Blake Snell. And if you take into account the fact that the Padres have had such a great defense this year, that, covers up for a little bit of Blake Snell's mistakes. Don't get me wrong, the strikeouts are incredible, but also Spencer Strider doesn't walk nearly as many people. 7.6% walk rate. It's not the lowest or anything, but 13.7% for Blake Snell is also the highest of any starter in the National League. So again, it's possible that he wins the Cy Young, and I think he's the number one thing to watch for. And even if he doesn't, at the minimum, it's just fun watching this guy pitch. Because, yeah, he's going to walk a lot of batters and make you nervous, but what's so great about him is that he's only giving up walks or strikeouts. Like, that's the only thing basically Blake Snell is doing. So, and if people hit him, it's like a solo shot sometimes, right? Like, they're not managing to hit him all that hard. Blake Snell's been amazing, and I'm hoping that this stretch could continue. But I will say, if he wants to win the Cy Young, I think, especially when you take into account that voters occasionally, and I don't fault them for this, will use as a little bit of a tiebreaker the team's success, like a tiebreaker. So if the things are really, really close and they're like, you know what, I want to reward the guy on this unbelievable Braves team who has been a dominant force all year, one of the reasons they've been great. I know that they're better. I know. I'm just saying, you take that into account. You take into account the Padres' better defense. I still think Spencer Strider is the favorite, but it's still going to be fun to watch him. So that's reason number one. Reason number two to keep watching the Padres here. Oh, baby. I'm excited about this one. We got to talk about both catchers. First, the Gary Sanchezans. Is that roll off the tongue right? Sanchezans? It's not bad, but it's not great either. I wouldn't use it again. But St. Gary, he's been phenomenal, basically the whole season. And I'm very curious to see whether or not the Padres bring this guy back next year. And I talked with Ben Kaspick of Locked On Giants the other day, and he was joking about how the Giants had been interested too. And I think that looking back, it probably didn't make sense that Gary Sanchez was a waiver guy, right? Like, I know that he hasn't been that successful of a player for a while now, right? Like his 2016, 2017 days with the Yankees when he actually walked and got on base at a better clip seemed to be behind him. And he made a lot of mistakes behind the dish. He could be really frustrating as a defensive catcher sometimes, but he's, while not been great behind the dish in terms of defense, in terms of, your pitch framing and whatnot, he certainly hasn't been bad, Gary Sanchez. And that's what's been so amazing about him. And since he hasn't been that bad behind the plate, that's what makes him so good. Guys. In terms of, like, if you look on Savant too, actually, he's had some pretty decent metrics. 65th in framing among catchers, 65th percentile in framing. That's good. Blocks above average is low at 43rd, which I think is new to Savant so far. And his pop time is pretty good. And his, caught stealing above average. Like, he's thrown guys out. Is it a little bit fluky given Gary Sanchez's past history of not being the best defensive catcher? Maybe. But I don't think he's abhorrent. I don't think he's Austin Nola level. I don't think this is, worst defensive catcher ever or anything like that. And as a result, anything he gives you offensively is a plus. He has a 111 WRC plus, which is the highest he's had since 2019 with the Yankees when he had a 116. And the difference, now I will say, if you are nervous about Gary, in terms of, how can he keep putting this up? Do they want to really genuinely bring him back next year? I think you should consider it because it probably won't cost too much. And having him and the guy that we're going to talk about next behind the plate has been one of the few things giving me joy and one of the few redeeming things about the Padres this year. And I'm just saying, his home run stuff, that's been why he's been so effective, right? But that's always been Gary Sanchez's thing, right? He's got 18 home runs this year. It's already 2 more than all of last year. And it's basically his most since 2021, where he was awful and just, that was it. But I just think, like, if he's an average defender and he's going to hit the ball out of the ballpark every now and then, that's great, especially if you have another catcher that you're excited about. So remember, in terms of average catchers, they have around an 89 WRC plus. That's what you get from a catcher. Gary has a 111. So that's how good he's been already in terms of F4. He's been better than last year, and he's tied with his total from 2021. and might even get to the point of his 2019 season with the Yankees where he had a 2.4 F4. Not the best of his career. I don't think he's heading back to those 2016, 2017 levels when he was with the Yankees. But the fact that you were able to get this guy for nothing is awesome. And I love saying St. Gary. And lastly, as a meme sort of sense, it is genuinely hilarious that out of all the players that the Padres have brought in, that this dude is the one that has gotten better. He's like one of the only people to get better with the Padres. And as Ben joked, maybe it's because he stopped by with the Giants first when they were always playing for the AAA team and all that stuff. So who knows? It's still miserable for us in terms of player development sometimes and making players better. But alas, ladies and gentlemen, Gary Sanchez, the renaissance of St. Gary, has been something to behold, and I love just to keep watching it. And I'm really curious to see if he keeps it up, or at least keeps it up enough to genuinely warrant a conversation about whether or not they should bring him back next year. Me personally, I think it's a really great idea. I really do. Even if they have the number 3 reason to keep following the Padres, ladies and gentlemen. That is, of course, Luis Campuzano, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, my goodness. Look, it's amazing what happens when you give players time. Isn't it amazing? It's amazing, right? It's so good. When you give them a little bit of time to get better and you give them a chance, and look what happened. Luis Campuzano has been outstanding when it comes to his bat, right? Like, he's been outstanding. He's been one of the better offensive catchers already in baseball. And don't get me wrong, his pitching stuff, not great. Not great. In terms of framing metrics, he's at a -1. And in terms of cost stealing above average, he's been -1. He hasn't had too many balls get past him, which is good. He hasn't had many like blunders. He did have the errant throw to third base in the Cardinals series, which was unfortunate. But alas, he more than makes up for it when it comes to his bat this year. Genuinely astounding stuff. He's only striking out 19.1% of the time, which is far different from Gary Sanchez, who does strike out a lot. But Campuzano, he's just a hitting catcher. This is what he's always done. If you look at the history of him in minor league, this is why, for people who are wondering why I was so frustrated watching the Padres start someone like Austin Nola in front of him, a player who is not good at anything, and especially not very good at defense. So if you want to say Luis Campuzano wasn't getting starts because we have Austin Hedges who couldn't hit either, but at least he was able to, field pretty decently, that I understand. But keeping this kid behind for Austin Nola who couldn't field, that also made no sense. Again, I will never forgive the Padres for starting Austin Nola that many games. I think it was just absolutely absurd. But this year, Campuzano is slashing what looks good for non-catchers. 293, 336, 485 on the season. That's good for a 126 WRC plus. And if you take that into account for what I was saying before about catchers, the value of the 89 WRC plus on average this year amongst Major League catchers, that's like what? Like nearly 30% better? It's like 37% better than catchers offensively. Don't get me wrong, he's got a lot to work on when it comes to his defense, but he's still only 24 years old. And I think serves as a really splendid reminder. By the way, I was wrong. 13.1% strikeout rate for Luis Campuzano. Guy makes contact and hits for average. That's very rare for catchers. But anyway, and he's got how many home runs on the season? He's got 5 home runs on the season as well. I think that he's such a great example of why you need to wait and why you need to give things a chance. The Padres need more players like this. They need more prospects to come up and be solid for them. And they need more control. They need more flexibility with their roster. You need young guys to come in and give you depth. That's really important. And Campuzano has been one of those. And it's the reason why I keep calling, the Campuzano hive, why I keep shouting this all the time, because I really think it's absurd the way that they treat his progression. And it's like, I'm not surprised that he's doing well. Does he have things to work? Yes, of course. He's got to get better at pitch framing. He's got to get better overall as a defensive catcher. He doesn't throw out runners a lot. And runners are just free on the bases when he's up there. But those are things that I think you can get better at. He's only 24 years old. I think he could at least improve to the point where he's average there. And if you do that, and he's this great of a hitter, you're in for something really, really special. So if you don't want to re-sign Gary Sanchez, it's really nice to know that the Padres have this guy behind the dish until the prodigal son, Ethan Salas, is ready. But speaking of Salas, I hope to God that this Gary Sanchez renaissance and Luis Campuzano finally getting a chance doesn't tempt them to trade him or trade Campuzano or Sanchez. I just like this. I think it's a good problem to have. Having all these catchers that are really good for us gives us a very weird and kind of bizarre unusual, that's three words that mean the same, advantage over other teams. Most teams don't have this, absent the Braves and maybe, I don't know, who else has a good duo of catchers? I can't really think of one aside from the Braves right now with d'Arnaud and Sean Murphy. There's got to be another one out there. I just can't really think of it right now, but incredible stuff from Luis Campusano, and I'm so glad that he's broken out. And yes, I plan on still tweeting about the Hive every time he does a big play. But everybody, we've got hold on, we've done 3, so we've got 4 more reasons for you to keep watching the Padres. But I have to take a sip of water and give you a word from our sponsors. And we're back, everybody, here on the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember, first listen every day, free and available on all platforms. Go check us out at SiriusXM. We still got a few more reasons to go through. The next reason, the last of the serious, just watching reasons, is Fernando Tatis Jr. And it's not just that. I want his counting stats to go up. And look, Tatis has not been that bad this year. He's actually been one of the few things I got right about this team. I was expecting literally exactly what he's been doing so far, with the exception of the defense. I'm talking about just the one number, F4. Right? In terms of wins above replacement, he's got 4 right now, which is really good. It's like top 20 in the league. Like, he's really good. But the big part of that is because of his defense, right? Like, that's been the big reason that Tatis has been so exceptional. In the outfield this year, he has 22 defensive runs saved, which might lead all of baseball, by the way, in terms of just all positions. And then he's got 10 outs above average. Don't get me wrong, the defensive runs saved, I think, is just slightly inflated because of the outfield assists. It doesn't matter because his outs above average mark is so good, his fielding is so great, speed, all that stuff, that I'm not saying he's getting lucky or anything, but I think the reason he has so many defensive runs saved is because so many teams kept testing that arm of his, especially early on in the year. I mean, you guys remember, he was throwing out a runner like every other day. It was crazy. So Tatis largely has that 4-win mark because of his defense. His offense has been okay. He's got a 116 WRC plus, and by okay, I mean okay by his standards. This is a guy who's put up a 150 WRC plus every single year, with the exception of this year, and he's taken a 40-point bump. That sounds bad, but even still, when you consider that he's coming off the injury and the suspension, the humiliation of the suspension, all the pressure, and just the fact that everyone on this team has been pretty disappointing, he's been excellent. 263, 327, 455 slash line. The good news about him is that he cut down in strikeout rate, which is good, at 22%. The bad news is he's not quite hitting for as much power as before. His 192 isolated power mark is the lowest of his career, by far. Like, by far. The lowest of his career before that was 272. He's freaking crazy, right? But he still managed 20 home runs, and he has 23 stolen bases as well. So I'm watching Tatis just to get those numbers up and to see if he has, catches fire. Because I'm just rooting for this guy to shut people up. If you want, you can go listen to my episode, read my article on Tatis becoming a villain and how I think it's absurd and a little bit hypocritical of fans every now and then to show this energy towards this guy for what he did versus what we show other players for what they do. If you catch my drift. But I'm really hoping that he gets those counting stats up. If he finishes as like a 30-30 guy, like low key, that's still totally possible, especially if he gets hot. He's definitely the type of player that can get hot at the right time. And it would be nice for the fans and whatnot. I think that he still has a lot of issues, though, because the walk rate is down 8.3%, down from 11.4 in 2021, and down from 10.5 in 2020. So it's not great to see him regress in that area. He's just been super impatient at the plate, swinging at everything. He's so talented that even if he swings at everything, he can, at the minimum, put it in play. But still, he needs to walk more. He needs to see more pitches. That's been the big weakness with him. But he's also been unlucky. His weighted on base is 336. His expected weighted on base is 380. It's one of the largest discrepancies in Major League Baseball when it comes to weighted on base and expected weighted on base. Like, one of the largest discrepancies. So he has been getting unlucky, but I don't think it's entirely predicated on that. Still has a 116 WRC plus, still swings at way too many pitches. That's why, right? So I don't think that this is all, just astronomical unluckiness. I think that that's compounded the fact that he's just a little rusty. So I'm hoping for him to keep stealing bases and get to that 30-30. At the minimum, just for my fantasy baseball hopes. At the minimum, that's what I'm hoping for, right? Just to give me 30 home runs and 30 steals. That would be pretty incredible coming off of your, first season back following the suspension and injury, the shoulder surgery, which people seem to be forgetting, I think, every now and then. So that's a big reason to root for Tatis. And those are the four kind of just like statistical, more empirical reasons to keep watching the Padres. But I've got some last three ones that I want to quickly run through of reasons to watch the Padres. Number one's easy. It's Don Orsillo, right? It's Don and Mud. It's Don and Mud Grant. Hold on, Mark Grant. I phrased that weirdly. I love hearing them, and it was funny that even when like they had the walk-off loss to Tommy Edman on the hit, and then when I don't think it was on the walk-off home run, it was on the night before when Tommy Edman hit the game winner off Josh Hader. Even Don Orsillo was like, and now they fall to 0-11 in extra innings. Unbelievable. You know, I think I did a pretty decent impersonation there. Unbelievable. Like both of them, it's so fun listening to them. Like at the minimum, I could just like, if I could mute game audio and only hear their audio and just have that on in the background as I do something, I would love that. I think it would be great. They're always so awesome. I'm not breaking any news here, but them alone are a reason to watch. It reminds me a little bit of, I bring this documentary up a lot, The History of the Mariners, when they get into the part about Dave Niehaus, former play-by-play broadcaster of the Mariners. For a team that was bad for so long, it can make a difference, man, when your announcer's great. Break out the rye bread for the Grand Salami. He was big time for the Mariners, and he was the reason for people to keep listening. Like, he was great. And Don and Mud, I think, together are the reason to keep watching the Padres alone. I really do believe that. I think that they've been excellent the whole season, despite how miserable that this season has been, despite how just dejected this team looks all the time. Just shouts to Don and Mud, as always, killing it. The next thing. The next fun thing. I genuinely think I am rooting for them to lose in extra innings. Go ahead. Yell at me. Throw the tomatoes at the screen. Punch me in the face if you are near me at all in my grand state of New Jersey. Go ahead. Go ahead. Send me mean DMs. I want them to keep losing like this way. Because here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. After it's been happening for so long, when you're this bad for so long and this disastrously off what your projection was, it starts to become a comedy. It really does. It actually starts to become funny. As someone who still is a Chargers fan, it is occasionally funny. If you're someone who follows, let's say, the same way we all like seeing the Cowboys blow it year after year, every now and then losing does become really funny. And I think if the Padres were to lose another game in extra innings, it would be iconic. Because, in fact, if they did lose another one, they would be in the record since the 1967 Expos, I believe, are the only team to lose this, to have this bad of a record in extra innings. So if y'all want to break some records, that's one that they very, very, very much can break. And we still got a month left. So I am actively rooting for them to make it to extra innings and lose another one. Because you know why? Just to be optimistic for a second, I think them losing and breaking that record, among smart baseball fans who like to think empirically and like to not just be too tribalist about everything, like some of the Dodgers fans in my YouTube comments every 5 minutes. But guys, remember, they don't care about us. They just love commenting on all our stuff. I actually think that it would serve as like a good piece of evidence for myself to be like, see, it's not just that it's poor management and that the player, it's like ridiculous how bad they've been. Unlucky bad, some might even say. That's where we're at. And I think that this would help that. Where I even think the naysayers, again, people who can think empirically and not just want to roast the Padres, especially from small market teams, even though the Padres doing what they're doing is literally in the best interest if they win, because then it might show their ownership and show everybody that, spending actually amounts to something, and that's good. Looking at you Brewers fans, I don't know why you're cheering for your team spending less money. Like, it's just ridiculous to me. But I think that it would be really, really fun as like a little bit of a counterpoint, because I do think that while the Padres not having this much of a budget and barely squeaking into the playoffs all the time, in the case of 2021 or, the collapse, and then in 2022, great season, but they only won 89 games despite the big budget and all that stuff, that isn't luck-based, but them being like 8 games below 500, not even close to the wild card, losing to teams like the Giants the way they lost last night in embarrassing fashion, that starts to veer into, all right, you shouldn't be this bad though. So unlucky sense. So for me, that's why I'm rooting for it. If that makes any sense at all, I'm rooting for them to break that record. I think it would be great. We broke the Grand Slam record. Inside you, there are two wolves, right? Broke the Grand Slam record. Let's break the extra innings loss record, ladies and gentlemen. I think it would be fantastically funny. And then the last thing to look forward to is just more clubhouse stuff. This is more of a general thing. The last reason to watch is just to see, like, if these guys snap the way Manny Machado did, is to see what everybody looks like. What is going to happen? When are we going to get that athletic article that is like, here's what was going on all year. Here's what it was like inside the Padres clubhouse and organization. Just festering with sadness and awful. That's what I imagine the Padres clubhouse has been like. But I think that's the last reason. I do. I think that in general, that athletic piece, whatever reports we're going to get on this team, is something to look forward to. I know that doesn't entirely require watching the team, but I do think that if you're just a fan of seeing people lose their minds, greater than 0% chance we get more of a blow up than we just saw with Manny Machado. In fact, that might be the most tame we've seen from what has been going on under the scenes, I imagine, with how frustrating this has been. I know I saw someone post a picture yesterday of Juan Soto, like just like hanging over the dugout rail, just head down. And I was like, yeah, that's Padres, baby. That's Padres. And again, they're not officially eliminated from the playoffs. How, I have literally no idea. Like, I genuinely don't know how they're still in it. It's because for some reason, this third wild card, National League teams just refuse to grab it. This has kind of been the case for a while, but the Padres, to make the playoffs, they currently have a 0.5% chance. It is about done. It is about done. And if you're wondering what my last other reason is to keep watching the Padres, once they get eliminated, the hat is coming back. That's a little bonus reason for you guys. At least for a little bit, it's coming back. So again, those are my reasons to keep watching the Padres, at least for the time being. I know that there are other reasons. You still want to see if you get some good memes to come out of things. If you get, minor league stuff, but that's minor league stuff and all these things. And maybe if they call up any prospect for whatever reason, if they're dumb enough to call up Jackson Merrill in a lost season, right? Maybe that happens. But otherwise, those are my 7 reasons, big reasons, including the bonus that once they're eliminated, I will be memeing and dreaming with this hat, especially. But let me just recap them one more time, folks. Blake Snell's potential Cy Young season. Fernando Tatis Jr. increasing his counting stats because I want to shut the haters up who are really annoying. Luis Campusano and Gary Sanchez because I think that they're both great, and I think it would be really interesting to see if they bring back Gary, and we'll have to see if they just, I don't know, make us happy. And the Campusano especially showing us as a sign of what happens when you're a little bit more patient. And then just going to be rooting for Don and Mud to keep carrying us along, keep showing us that you can still be entertaining and fun. It'll be like a free podcast every day, dare I say. You can listen to mine, and then you can listen to Don and Mud do their masterwork every night. Basically 2 podcasts as far as I'm concerned. Things could be a lot worse. And then, of course, waiting for clubhouse potential drama if you're a drama person. Not to sound like this type of reality Jersey Shore type of attention span of mine is what's keeping me invested. I'm just saying it's true, and I'm also looking forward to seeing if we get that athletic, crazy sort of, feature story on this team. And then lastly, I genuinely want them to break the extra innings record, and I think it would be funny. So if you're able to do all that, if you're able to turn the sorrow into humor and kind of laugh at the absurdity of everything, I still think you can watch the Padres and at least have a not awful time. I'm not going to say a great time, but a not awful time. Those are just some tips, and I'd be curious if you guys have any tips or any reasons you think there are to still keep watching the Padres team. Let me know. The only one that I left off was Ha-Seong Kim because I thought it was too obvious, in my opinion, just to be like, Ha-Seong Kim's great. I agree. It's probably the last reason. Ha-Seong Kim's been great. Just to see his smile. That's reason number 8. Just to see Kim smile. I just want to see him smile again. In game winner, anything. I just want to see the man smile again. That'd be nice. But everybody, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast. Of course, leave me comments, DM me any other funky little creative reasons you think that I should recommend other people watching the Padres for. Might feature them in an episode next week. And speaking of next week, probably going to talk about not all the game recaps, but just the Padres' performance over the last week. Going to be doing that on Monday. Going to be doing my crossover with Millard. Going to be talking about positive stuff, why I think the Padres could still be in a good position going forward, and more so than other great teams in baseball. I think they could be better set for the future, and you can look forward to that, and you can look forward to me talking about whether AJ Preller needs to be fired. It's got to be asked. The question must be asked, ladies and gentlemen. It must be asked. Maybe a little bit of thing on Trent Grisham, too. Is it time to give up on Trent Grisham? Might be. But those are just a little bit of couple teases for you guys going forward. Until next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Fire Faithful homies, take care.